The following is a special presentation of iRacing on LSR TV, your home for sim racing.
Live tonight at Virginia International Raceway, we are set to go for a makeup round. That will be round 7 of 30 here for the CEA American Pool Supplies Truck Series, and it's going to be an exciting night full of a lot of action here. It's a road course for trucks, and for myself, I'm Trevin Valderrama, next to Gary Weaver and Cisco Scaramuza down in the production trailer, twisting and tweaking all the dials to get you guys ready for 40 laps around a very twisty track here. 20 turns, 2.25 miles in length, and we're going to have 40 laps, so that equates to 90 miles of elbow-up racing. Gary, what are you expecting to see tonight?
Essentially, we've already got Christian Peterson on the pole right now, so he's already set the pace, but we have other drivers in the minute 27 range, so they're in a way a combination of 5/10 faster. Essentially, we're going to be seeing, most likely, I'm expecting to see a lot of people being very conservative on the start because, like you mentioned, the track is 2.25 miles, but somehow it's actually shorter than Daytona, which is 2.5 miles. So this race is roughly expected to be about an hour tops, unless I believe we do get any full course cautions here. But aside from that, though, this race is going to be very, very exciting.
And you talk about how it's going to be shorter than Daytona International Speedway or Super Speedway, but however, this is going to be nothing compared to that. This is a road course, and these drivers definitely have to be conservative in the beginning. Make sure they save their tires and make sure they don't do anything too drastic too early. You talk about maybe having full course cautions, but you got to go into tonight knowing that there may not be any cautions at all, and you got to be wary of that. It's just going to be really interesting to see all these drivers, make that battle up tonight. And I'm hearing word that a lot of drivers are having about 23 laps for fuel. So we're maybe going to be seeing drivers split this race in half, go 20 laps, come down pit road, lap 20, lap 21, lap 23 even, maybe even drivers stretching it out to lap 24. And, just going down pit road, pitting, obviously take their service, and then go out. But that's just fuel. Will they be coming down earlier for tires, or are they just going to risk it to the end? Gary?
I mentioned the 23 laps worth of fuel. Essentially, for me, a personal strategy would be conserve as much as possible. Maybe if I do have enough fuel, it would be to pit about lap, I don't know, say 20, maybe at least halfway, just split it down right down the middle since we do have an even number of laps. So it'll be conserve and then just split the race 20 laps in the first half, then 20 laps in the second half, and then, well, next thing you know, you don't really have anything to worry about.
Yeah, and it's gonna be an interesting race tonight. 40 laps again. It's doesn't seem like a lot of laps, but here at a track where you're not really going all that fast and you're making sure that you hit every single mark correctly is gonna be really important for all these drivers, and make sure that you do not get caught up with anything early on in this race, because again, it could go, green flag all the way. You got to make sure that you're going to stay up in that top area. If you're in the back, you got to make sure that you're not caught up in anything early. And if you're in the back still after a few laps, you're going to have a long night ahead of you trying to get up every single position after that. You talk about Christian Peterson being at the top of the standings right now after pole sitting. But for that right now, we're going to go trackside and give you the starting grid for tonight's race. That's going to be coming up here in a few moments' time. But for right now, we're going to have on pole position going to be Christian Peterson with a 1:27.425. So that's a great start for him. And number 26, Joe Burchett, going to be on position number 2.
And then rounding up the top 5, completing the 1 minute 27 range is Seth the Merchant with a 1 minute 27.561, about 6 hundredths off, 6 100ths off of Joe Burchett's time. So essentially it's 0.06, not too bad. So it's very, very interesting to see that all these drivers are in the top 3. Aside from that, though, starting in 4th place is Matt Cucker in the first 69, first driver just barely in the top portion of the 1 minute 28 range, and then James Krahula rounds out the top 5.
Tyler Dalton's going to be starting P6. P7 will go to John Lyday. P8, Austin Coop. Matthew Murphy will start P9, and Jeremy Adams will start P10.
Starting 11th will be the 34 of Mike Rhino. Gerald Campbell starts in 12th, 13th, Reese Bayham, 14th, Derek Paulson, and 15th, John Theodore.
P16 will be John Magnaka. Tim Kemp will be P17. Sean Cross will be P18. P19, and the last one to take a time will be Tom Morano. Kenny Lowry and Paul Henley do not take a time, and they'll be rounding out the rear of your field. Tonight's race of American Pool Supply Truck Series here will be obviously brought to you by CEA American Pool Supply Truck Series. Brought to you by American Pool Supply. American Pool Supply is a wholesale distributor of pool and landscaping products. We serve pool maintenance, resorts, apartment complexes, and HOAs in the Las Vegas area. Learn more by visiting them on Facebook at American Pool Supply LV. Again, that's on Facebook at American Pool Supply LV. Taking the grid now, all of these drivers out and ready to go. I believe it's going to be 1 pace lap. Yes, that does look to be what it is. And, this is going to give them a lot of time to think about every single turn that they're going to have to deal with throughout these 40 laps. And what's going through a driver's mind right now, Gary?
All right, now going through their mind, that would be double check everything that you have right now. Make sure you have the correct setup, the correct fuel load before you realize that you have your qualifying fuel load in, and you won't be able to make it at least about 5 laps possibly at this track. But aside from that, for these drivers, they just have to be focused on getting through the first few laps as clean as possible, not trying to go off track. I've been seeing many drivers go off track in the practice session and possibly qualifying too, I believe. So it's going to be interesting. You have to be careful with the curbs at this track as well. Those things will be, anyway, pretty deadly.
Yeah, you talk about going off track, and that's going to be one of the things that we're going to have to look out for tonight is with this new dynamic track that they have in the iRacing service. If you go out track, you're going to bring dust back onto the track. So after time, after a few laps and then just keep on hitting that same spot over and over again, obviously it's going to bring dust onto the track, and they're going to have to deal with that as drivers and make sure that they don't do anything too drastic going through that section and, test the track limits, I like to say, and, go out there, maybe lose some traction and then, cause another accident. But you got to watch yourself. This is a very narrow track. I was watching these drivers go around in practice as they pull away from the grid, and this track is extremely narrow. It's going to be really hard to see some too wide battles going on, but these drivers are the best, and they're going to have to figure out how they're going to make their moves around every single turn. The S's section coming out of the first few couple turns, it's basically one line that goes straight through all the turns. So finding each and every spot to pass is going to be very critical here tonight, especially at a road course. It's just going to be really hard for each driver. They got to conserve their tires, conserve their fuel, and make sure that every single person will be able to complete every single lap and just make sure that they're there at the end. If it's going to be a points night for you, make sure that you make every single judgment based on that. And if you're going to go for the win and move up through the field, make sure that you're going to do everything in your power to get up to that field.
You have to get through the field as much as possible. Where these drivers are heading at the moment According to this track map that I have up here, they're just now slowly starting to make their way over to what appears to be turn number 10, it seems. Maybe incorrect there. Nope, that does appear to be 10. So aside from that, this very long back straightaway, though, is these drivers will be coming up onto that. Nope, scratch that, wrong course. Apologies for that. It's actually turn, the S section, like you mentioned. So pretty much turn 7 through essentially 14A is completely full of just S's back and forth. So like you mentioned, essentially the only passing zone here for what I'm seeing is a little short sheet that these drivers are coming up on, and the 17A exit all the way to turn number 1.
Yeah, and here we go, coming down to the last couple of corners. The iRacing pace car about to duck its way out onto pit road in a few moments time to go down on the straightaway to give the field in the hands of Christian Peterson. It's about to go down into pit road. There it is, and the Virginia International Raceway race is green here, and we're gonna see how these drivers go down into turn number 1 side by side. Each driver still good to the point. This first turn is going to be really critical for all these drivers, making sure they give enough space so nothing really bad happens for the first few couple trucks. It's all good. We're going to have one driver off. That's going to be the 89 or the 69 of Matt Cucker, excuse me. And Christian Peterson going to be able to pull away a little bit with a little bit of side-by-side battle with the number 26 of Joe Burchett and Seth the Merchant going down into the, I'd say that's the 4th turn, I believe, 3rd or 4th turn, and a quick another right-hander to another right-hander, and here are the S's that I was talking about. Every single driver making it clean. So far, seems to be single file for the most part.
Oh,
Everybody's
contact
making
in
it
the
through.
back. Heavy contact for John Lyday, who's upside down, and I just had a quick rollover, and that was Matt Cucker, actually, that also made contact with him in the back ever so slightly. The Cucker tried to make him move at the wrong moment and clipped the door panel of Lyday, and that sent him heavily into the guardrail, and Lyday has decided to call it a day.
Yeah, you know, you talk about this unlined S section, Matt Cucker had to, make up some time after getting into the grass early in turn number 1, and obviously that's just a unfortunate timing event for all of these drivers, as now we're going to look back up to the front with Christian Peterson leading the way of lap number 1 with Joe Burchett close behind, then Seth the Merchant a little bit further back, and now everybody's getting themselves spread out and making sure that they're going to be able to make every single lap imperative for them to get around each other, just looking around for battles going on. And we have, that's going to be the number 84, John Theodore, battling closely with John Mignacca, very close together, and seems to be, just every single driver really logging laps tonight and making sure that they're there at the end. Joe Burchett still trying to hunt down that number 23 of Christian Peterson.
And meanwhile, just a little bit of a wild moment for that 06. He is fine right now, so he almost accidentally turned Derek Paulson. He was off the track just a little bit. That 06 is Joe Campbell, so he is still going as of right now in the 11th place position. But for the majority of this field, they are pretty spread out, but some of these drivers are going to be dealing with their own individual battles here in possibly a few laps' time. And like you mentioned, Christian Peterson is going to be one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Christian Peterson still trying to lead the way through every single turn, making every single turn really clean, knowing that he doesn't have a lot of time to get stuff done, and just got to be really clean throughout everything and make sure that everything is perfect for him throughout this race. Just make sure that he can make every single lap, as now we're going to have a little bit of a scramble for that appears to be 10th position. That's going to be 9th position, actually. That's going to be Jeremy Adams, Jared Campbell, and Derek Paulson very closely together going into turn number 1. The number 5 trying to go under battle. That was very close in the 06. So Jared Campbell is off the track. That's going to leave the door open for Austin Coop to try to take advantage, and now he's going to go around the outside. The number 5 is going to say, there you go, you can have it. It's very early on in the race, and Austin Coop's going to be able to take away that position from him and I believe that's 9th position that he's going to get now. John Theodore really close behind, and then followed closely by another train of John Mignacca, Matt Cucker, William Kemp. Matt Cucker really not having that well of a start. He started 4th, and he's all the way back to 15th, that appears to be. So just, that shows how much of a track can really mess with your standings after one little lap and one little incident, Gary.
Yeah, Trev, and all these minor accidents seem to be playing very, very large in terms of positioning. And wow, Christian Pearson took the curb a lot, and he's still managing to keep that thing going straight. I saw him take a heavy curb. My goodness, he was practically on 2 wheels for a couple of moments there. I believe that was about turn 12 or so, maybe 12A. But aside from that, he still got that. He still has a nice gap between he and Joe Burchett. So maybe that second place driver in that number 26, essentially he could be maybe essentially trying to put a little bit of pressure on Christian Peterson while still not really trying to make any positions up.
Yeah, and talk about using the curbing at road courses. It helps your truck rotate so much. You basically have to use it, as we see Christian Pearson go off on that left side a little bit, but brings it back. Still has a sizable gap on Joe Burchett. That's about 0.5 of a second. As Austin Coop moves up in that 10th position, as we are registering the place standings after each lap. But Christian Pearson has to use those curbings because it's really hard to turn a truck like this on every single turn. So you have to have some assistance sometimes, and some drivers might like more curbing than others, and it might fare hard to the truck a little bit more. And maybe some drivers don't like as much to try to protect the truck. But once you see, just look at how Christian Pearson just goes over that curbing right there to help that truck maneuver around these tight corners. You can just see how tight this track is. It's very narrow, and these drivers are doing such a great job really battling with everything. And it's just going to be an interesting way to see all these drivers really compete with everything. And some of these drivers are really having a tough time. I was seeing Jared Campbell following him for about a lap, and he was really having a tough time keeping it on the track. And John Lyday has called it a day after that first incident. He's pulled it behind the wall, and really unfortunate way to end his
Christian
race.
Pearson just won the round. Got a bit too much into the grass, a little bit too much speed, and then the right side tires ever so slightly clipped the grass, and he just got himself turned, unfortunately, by mistake. So he's dropped back all the way to 6th place now.
Yeah, and you're just going to try and carry too much speed going into that corner. You can see how his back end just washed out. I think he was just too hard onto the brakes, and just turned right around really quickly. And he's going to lose quite a bit of spots from that. That appeared to be 5 spots, quite possibly. He's going to have a long night ahead of him, trying to battle back and trying to get everything that he possibly can from everything that he can. Joe Burchett's going to take away that race lead from him, while Seth the Merchant's going to take 2nd, and then James Carula will take that 3rd place position. So you talk about trucks at VIR, and it's an interesting car track combo. It is indeed, but you got to think about all the other tracks on the schedule that are really interesting. So I really like how these guys are doing this here. It's very interesting, very exciting. We had Knoxville early on, and now we're going to have this interesting road course. And obviously, it's really taken a really hard amount of people to really understand how this track is working. And we've seen a lot of people struggle with how these trucks are going to handle throughout the rest of this track and throughout the night. Going through lap 6, Joe Burchett still leading, has a 6.1 gap on Seth the Merchant, so it's going to be quite the distance to make up for Seth the Merchant here tonight. Only lap 6 though, so he's got a lot of time to make up.
And entering turn 1, Matthew Murphy got a little bit too loose, possibly a little bit too hard on the brakes entering turn number 1, and spun out ever so slightly in front of Christian Peterson, but Peterson just barely managed to avoid it with absolutely no damage out of all of that. So essentially 1 lap, and he's already down, at least as of right now, 4 positions from where he started. So it's just going to take him a little bit longer for him to get back up to 1st place. A really big wiggle out of that turn right there, just entering the S's section. That's about turn 6, or at least the exit of turn 5A.
And watching a battle going on between Bayham and Jeremy Adams going into that, I guess you would call it, little carousel in the back of the track, the number 89 basically did the same thing that Christian Peterson did. Took a little too much heat going into the corner and then went off track and lost about 2 positions right up front, and is back on track now. But you just got to watch out for all of those braking sections and make sure that they are flawless going throughout every single one. And it's going to be really important for all these drivers to do what they can. John Theodore, Matt Cuck are still fighting it out for position number 11. That's John Theodore right in front of Matt Cucker. And Matt Cooker's going to look to the inside, or to the right side, I guess, because we don't really have inside or outside on road courses per se. But he's going to take a look to the the right side, inside of that driver. Now he's going to be able to complete that pass. He's going to have to set his sights, though, on Jeremy Adams. That's going to be P number 10 he's going to be able to look for. And that's going to be not too far in front of him. So now Matt Cucker really... Oh, what a slide across that turn. And he's going to maybe lose that position to John Theodore. No, he's going to be able to keep it for now. But what a slide, and he saved it. That was perfect. He had obviously lost time on Jeremy Adams, but Matt Cucker able to save it ever so much. Some short track knowledge being advantage to him right there. Now going into that carousel part and really just making sure Jeremy Adams and Mike Rhino really know he's right there, and he's going to try and make up every single piece of time possible. And now we're going to see how these drivers are really reacting. Reese Bam and Austin Cooper going back at it again throughout this. So, even though it's spread out, there's still a lot of fighting going on, Gary.
Yeah, Christian Pearson just made his way up to the 4th place position past Tyler Dalton. So, like you mentioned, that battle between Coop and Bayham, well, in this case, Bayham and Coop, which is for position number 7, essentially, still a bit strung out at the moment, but the thing that I've noticed is that not a lot of many drivers are actually having a little bit of trouble between, I'd say, about, in terms of leader of Joe Burchett, pretty much right about here, which is the beginning of the S section. So from about turn 6 to pretty much the end of the S section, which is about turn 14 or so, for that hard right-hander, basically an extended version of the bus stop, just without a road to go through. Which right here is where Joe Burchett's going, so I believe that's where it is. But aside from that, though, he's made his way by, so Christian Peterson slowly working his way up to the 3rd place position of James Kahula right now. But like I mentioned, that battle for 7th right now is still ongoing as Austin Cooper is trying to catch up to Bayham, but at the moment he can't really find any momentum.
It's a 3-car battle really going on. A little further back also, Jeremy Adams, Mike Rhino, and Matt Cuck are still under a blanket, and battles still going on for that 7th position as well. So really 2 battles going on closely together throughout this whole entire track, and really seeing how all of these drivers are really taking advantage of every single corner, every single opportunity to get themselves everywhere that they can. And they got to think about how their tires are really wearing off, and make sure that they're able to make it to that halfway point if that's when they're going to pit or whenever they're going to pit. And it's just going to be really interesting to see how these drivers are going to deal with one another. Going to look back towards that fight for, I believe that is 9th position. Matt Cucker right behind Jeremy Adams going into turn number 1. We'll see how he does it. He took advantage of last lap taking another pass, and you see him just get ever so loose coming out of that corner. He's going to have to find himself a good rhythm and stick with it. He's getting closer to Jeremy Adams, just watching every single turn and which turn these drivers are good at and which drivers they're not so good at, and how the opponent is really good at that corner. You see how these drivers are really taking these corners, and the driver behind Jeremy Adams, that's Matt Cucker, really have to see how how Jeremy Adams reacts to some of these turns and thinks, how am I going to be better next time around to make sure that I can complete this pass with ease and make sure that it's not going to bring both of us out of this race, because Matt Cucker has already been out before, but Seth the Merchant now taking that 2nd place position away and not so far behind Joe Burchett. So really Seth the Merchant has made a great rebound to get himself up into the top spot again, but he's going to have a little bit more battle to go, Gary.
And definitely have much more ballots to go. And for the top 4 and a spin, unfortunately. So these top 4 now is essentially strung out ever so slightly, but they are close to each other in their own way. So just a little bit of a distance between all of these drivers, and essentially it looks to be about the same distance in terms of car length. And Christian Peterson, of course, rounds out that top 4 where he's trying to look to get back up into that first place position as quick as possible, but right now most likely he's definitely taking his time, just trying to cruise along.
Yeah, cruising along indeed. It's only lap 10. I say it's only lap 10, but there's 40 laps here tonight, and going off of statistics, say it should be about 50-minute race. So these drivers got to know there's not really that much time left, but there's still enough time to get something done. As you see James Krahula in that neon yellow paint scheme, you cannot miss him. He's tracking down Seth the Merchant ever so slightly, but Christian Peterson is hot on his trail, and it's really tough for these drivers to see how these other drivers are faring with other corners compared to them. And you just got to make sure that you see how these drivers are making sure that they're good on this corner, and then see what corners they can beat each other at. As we say that, Tom Moreno and Jeremy Adams have both pulled it behind their wall, so they are done for the night. That's going to be 3 drivers out already for tonight, lap 11 here tonight at Virginia International Raceway. Christian Peterson still trying to track down James Krahula as we're riding on board with him through all of these twists and turns. And you can just see how narrow this track really is. And then as we go through the S's, really see how there's only one lane that each driver can take going into the corner. So if Christian Peterson wants to make another move on him, he's got to wait. Possibly. You can see also on the S's about that second kink, how these tires are really going off, and there he goes, taking that 3rd place position away from James Krahula. Knowing that Christian Peterson is faster than him, he lets him have that right side that gives him the preferred lane going into the corner, Gary.
Yeah, it's a smart move to not really put up as much of a fight as you want to, or else you're going to risk having yourself taken out, the other driver taken out, or both of you taken out, or in most cases at the very minimum just going off the racetrack. But right now Seth the Merchant is trying to figure out some way to get up to that first place position, but unfortunately he is 1.8 or so seconds off. Christian Peterson is roughly the same distance. So aside from that little bit of a battle between Austin Coop and Reese Bayham, these 2 are still trying to fight it out right now, and number 1 truck is hanging on as best as possible right now.
Yeah, watching both of these guys. There he goes to that right side, trying to squeeze it so tightly. He's going to be able to, stay inside, and Reese Bam's going to breathe a sigh of relief and, try to gather himself back up. We're going to see Austin Coop try to go to that right side again, going into turn number 1, maybe side by side, door to door. Yes, he's going to be able to take it and clear him. Going into turn number 3, that is, then the quick left-hander and then another quick right-hander. So able to make that quick pass on him. That's going to be Austin Coop taking that position away. I believe that's going to be P number 7, as we're going to take a look back up to the top to Seth the Merchant, trying to get around, and I believe he did get around Joe Burchett. So Seth the Merchant now back in the lead. Then Christian Peterson followed closely behind, and I can only imagine, yes, Joe Burchett did, going into the carousel, he got a little loose. He did the same thing that Seth the Merchant did. He got into the corner way too hot, tried to brake a little too hard, and went sideways. So now Christian Peterson and Seth the Merchant are able to take advantage of that and drop him all the way back to, I believe that is 3rd place. We'll see if anything comes of James Krahula. For now, he's following closely behind, but surprise, surprise, it's Seth the Merchant and Christian Peterson up front.
And these 2 teammates trying to be essentially work together, but no doubt if they want to work together, probably Seth the Merchant may be letting Christian Peterson by, but that's something we'll be finding out in essentially probably most likely this lap, as Houston is already closing the gap as they just now enter turns 3, and then like right here is to be about turn 5A, and then number 6 right here. So essentially Once again, back into the S's section. Look how close Christian Peterson is. About truck length separates them. He looks to the driver's right side of that 57. And no move yet, but he was looking to that right-hand side of the Merchant. A little bit of a wiggle coming off turn number 7 there, but still managing to keep that second place position and still rolling forward.
And you got to make sure every single time that you go sideways, you got to save that truck, because you know that those tires are just screaming going sideways, and you got to be able to save them going into each and every turn, lap after lap, and make sure that these tires are going to be good enough to go however long that you want to go. Maybe these drivers just want to go a little bit more to save their tires, and that's going to be a car right off in front of them. I believe that was the number 16 of Paul Henley off another driver, really battling the track conditions. And now we're going to see Christian Peterson look to the right side again, going into turn number 1, out braking Seth the Merchant. That's going to be another pass for the race lead going into the turn number 1. That's really the passing zone that we've been seeing here tonight so far, other than drivers really getting off the track and really going off pace. But that's really where we're seeing most of these passes. Paul Henley, Sean Cross, Jeremy Adams already laps down, and all these drivers really making sure that their names are known. Joe Burchett has been able to catch back up. So the thing that we're seeing tonight, Gary, is that even though a driver will spin out, he'll still be able to make up so much time and be able to catch back up to these guys up in the lead pack.
Well, and Christian Peterson's, well, actually, yeah, now that you mentioned that, the lead pack definitely. So I was about to say in Christian Peterson's defense, well, of course it's Christian Peterson because he set the fastest lap time of the qualifying session. He got the pole time, so he's already making that known. And to make a little bit of a gap, but right now, someone that needs to make a gap is Seth the Merchant, but in a way it looks like it'll be Joe Burchett. If he can get by that number 57, and don't count that 4, James Corhula, he could be just riding along right now, conserving his tires. Because he's been up here with these guys, he just hasn't really gotten involved in any of the battles. And we should be seeing some people pit in about roughly 6 to 8 laps maybe. It's when we'd be seeing all these drivers start pitting.
Yeah, absolutely. And 6 to 8 laps can feel like an eternity at a road course, fighting all these twists and turns, making sure that each battle is so correctly. Joe Burchett nearly gets loose again as the number 4 of James Carullo just pops into the screen for a moment, showing how close he is and how ready he is to attack if a driver slips up ever so slightly. Gary, the thing that we're seeing tonight also is, under braking, these guys either brake too hard or too little, because you're seeing them brake too hard and their back end just wants to walk out on them. They do a fantastic job of saving it for the most part. A great example that we saw earlier was by Matt Cucker in that earlier parts of the race, and he just got sideways and he had the presence of mind to get off the gas and gather it back up before getting on the gas again and making sure that his truck was all collected before he went again. But really, these braking sections are being really tough on all these guys tonight.
Yeah, the thing is, for this track, you essentially should be racing the track and not the drivers, so hopefully that Christian Peterson's going to be making his way around Jag Manaka. So we've seen him, I believe, in the top 10 when this race started, but he's definitely run into a few troubles, unfortunately. So he's currently 15th, and well, there he goes off in front of Christian Peterson, not into the inside wall, thankfully, or left-hand side tire barriers. But nonetheless, though, unfortunately for John, just more issues. But for Burchett, he's going to have to, again, race the track and not Seth the Merchant.
Yeah, racing the track, obviously, how you're going to win this race tonight, that's exactly the correct way to state that, Gary. And just got to make sure that every single turn is so pitch perfect, and so you just got to make sure that you're going to flow so well. And if it's a high speed section, you can't let that scare you. You're going to go through a lot of high speed sections on every single track, and just knowing that you're a little bit so close to being out of control, that you're in control also at the same time, as weird as it sounds, but you can't let that scare you, and you got to make sure that every single move is so correct and so perfect. But Joe Burchett still trying to track down Seth the Merchant. He's really closed the gap right there going into that little carousel uphill section right there, going through another one of the S's. And as we're looking through all of this, again, they're just not really having that much time to really settle down, bring their elbows down. They're always elbow up. You know, the only time that they can really relax is that front straightaway, but then that even has a little dog leg. But Gary, how do you think all these drivers are really, you know, starting to wear after a few laps here? You know, you got to imagine that their shoulders, their wrists, their arms are really burning, just fighting the wheel and fighting every single turn that they're making.
Yeah, no doubt. I've done a completely different, done a road course race for a much longer amount of time over at Sonoma for 75 laps, so that was fun. And of course, no doubt from what these drivers are feeling, I can definitely say that at this point it's not really major, but by the end of the race you'll be feeling that again. You're mainly your arms, and for me my upper back is near my shoulder blades. That was pretty sore for a while, and Seth the Merchant barely manages to save it after getting on the grass ever so slightly. So essentially, either again, it's just have to be racing the track, not the driver. You just have to be careful, but also it could be a bit of a soreness kicking in, maybe a cramp here or there. But aside from that, you just have to be very careful and smooth, and just have to remember that this is probably one of the only times that you'll be racing at this track in a truck. So hopefully these drivers can test out their endurance and last until the end of the race.
And you see Seth the Merchant go off in that grass a little bit ago, you know, seeing how scary that moment was probably for him. And, you know, you just see drivers get their left sides, their right sides, even one little bit of tire into the grass, and they hit that gas pedal ever so slightly, and it just wants to whip around on them. That's how much that importance is, to stay on that race surface and make sure you do not go into the grass and, you know, cause yourself a race mistake. As we saw Matt Cucker, he's still trying to fight his way from that 15th place that he was before. William Kemp goes a lap down now, so that leaves 13 cars on the lead lap. The 09 of William Kemp just right in front of all these guys, so we'll see if it brings an effect to the 57 and 26. Christian Peterson really doing a fantastic job trying to break away from these guys. And, you know, we talk about how dominant Christian Peterson and Seth the Merchant are. Well, they're at the top of our point standings going into tonight. Seth the Merchant first, then Christian Peterson followed closely behind by 65 points. And then Tyler Dalton, William Kemp, and James Carula are your top 5. So you're always seeing these guys up front and making sure that their presence is known, riding on board with that number 26 machine of Joe Burchett. You know, seeing how these drivers are really fighting every single corner here tonight, Gary.
Yeah, essentially, it's just a matter of pretty much waiting. But we do have a competition caution coming up in just a few moments, possibly. We'll get an update on that as soon as we can. But competition caution coming up. So Christian Peterson currently in the lead, but right now Joe Burchett doing. Oh, there it is actually. So speaking of a few moments, literally a few moments.
And you know, that's another cool thing that they have implemented on this CEA American Pool Supply Truck Series. If the race admins deem that this race has gone on for a certain amount of laps that they predetermined before the race, they will throw a caution to bring all these guys back together and and just, you know, make sure that all these drivers are still having a fair chance. And, you know, this is great for us because we're going to see another great battle going down into turn number 1. And we saw these guys really start to lag back, and I believe that's just because they knew that the competition caution was going to be coming out probably halfway. So, you know, James Carula, we saw him just give up that position very easily, but still kept closely behind in that 4th place position. So very smart by him. Garrett, do you think we're going to be seeing takers down pit road, or are they going to wait a little bit longer?
I'd say we're going to be seeing a fair amount of people head down pit road this time around, no doubt, as a lot of drivers have yet to catch up, some on the opposite ends of the road course over here. But nonetheless, I personally would make the decision to head to pit road and keep that 50-50 strategy. Well, more in this case, it would be more of about in terms of laps 20-21, but nonetheless, though, I believe that we'll be seeing a fair amount of drivers head down pit road, maybe a few in your top 5, but that's something that's up to them, and that we'll have to find out here in, say, about 15 or so seconds.
Yeah, it's just a few moments time, and we'll see what drivers come down pit lane. I would say all these guys are still 13 drivers on the lead lap, and you know, seeing how these drivers are really going to take. I believe it's going to be 4 tires fuel. Splitting the field in half, or splitting the race in half, 50-50. So it's just going to be really cool to see these drivers really, basically it's a new race, Gary. It's just a brand new race. 4 tires, gas, and everybody's coming down pit road right now. I do not see one single car staying out for as far as I can see. But you got to make sure that each driver makes themselves into the pit stop. Every single one of them has to be so perfect. If you mess up, it's going to cost you a lot of track position going into the night, as Christian Peterson is the first one into the box. Seth the Merchant and Joe Burchett all next to each other. So we'll have to see how this works out. Who's going to be out first? Right side's up, left side's up. Sunoco fuel inside, and Goodyear tires all on. That's going to be Christian Peterson, Seth the Merchant, Joe Burchett, and James Carhula, all how they came in. And, all of them are perfect. I didn't see one slip up. So very good job by all of these guys out here tonight. And also, while we're under yellow flag conditions, I'd like to give a shout out to Joe Real Timing. Coverage of the CEA American Pool Supply Truck Series is brought to you by Joe Real Timing, the official timing software of LSR TV. Whether you spend your time on the sim, behind the wheel, or on the pit box, or from the spotter stand, JRT is the go-to software for iRacing timing and scoring analytics. Get yourself a basic download for free, or go to the pro version today at joel-real-timing.com. Again, that is joel-real-timing.com for a free trial, or basic free download, or the pro version. So you got to make sure you get over there and get everything going. And it's halfway, so we're going to do the iRacing halfway mid-race break as we cross the halfway point of tonight's race, which is lap 20. Let's take a look at our iRacing midway race break, brought to you by iRacing, the world's premier online racing game with professionally organized racing from NASCAR, IndyCar, IMSA, and more. So taking the look top to bottom, Christian Peterson currently where he started. That's going to be P1, Seth the Merchant P2, Joe Burchett P3, P4 goes to James Carhula, Tyler Dalton P5, Matt Cucker P6, making a good recovery so far, Matthew Murphy P7, Austin Coop P8, Reese Bayham P9, and P10 will be Mike Rhino.
In 11th is going to be John Theodore. Some of that possibly has yet to update through iRacing. Nonetheless, John Theodore in 11th, 12th, Derek Paulson, Gerald Campbell 13th, 14th, William Kemp, 15th is John Mignacca, Paul Henley 16th. Both of those drivers leave at least 2 laps down as the lights in the pace car go out. And unfortunately, the drivers that are out are Sean Cross, Jeremy Adams, Tom Moreno, and John Lyday, where Kenya Larry has unfortunately not started this race at all. He made an early retirement, so Mignacca and Henley both 1 lap down essentially. But right now it's going to be a matter of time, and it'll be quite interesting to see what these drivers do for this second half of the race.
And that's been a look at your iRacing midway race break. For more information on the wide variety of sim racing possibilities online, visit iRacing.com to sign up today. Thanks to our friends at Rallycross here tonight. You can start a membership, at iRacing.com/membership and use the promo code PRGRC for an opportunity to start your career on iRacing with 3 months for only $5. That's promo code PRGRC, and that's for new members only. So if you're a returning member, unfortunately, you cannot use that code. But if you're new, get on the service. What are you waiting for? It's a fantastic time. And jump back to the race, we have 14 drivers on the lead lap, and you can just see how much fun all these drivers are having. I say fun, but most of these drivers are getting a little loose and off the grass, but still they're having the time of their life battling all these track conditions throughout this 20-turn Virginia Raceway North Circuit. So we're gonna see now the closing stages of this race, and We're going to see how these two drivers of Christian Peterson, Seth the Merchant, I don't think they're going to be too nice now, Gary, going into that first turn, now that they know that this is it, and this is probably the last restart that they're going to have, going through the final parts of the S's, then completing that final two right-handers and onto the straightaway. We'll see how these drivers fare. Joe Burchett, James Krahula, Matthew Murphy, Austin Coop right there, right behind him, ready to jump at any opportunity that is there. They got to make sure that all their braking is so correct going into turn number 1. The pace car about to jump down into the safety of pit lane. There he goes. And we'll see when Christian Peterson decides to put the gas pedal down, and there it is. Seth the Merchant able to take a little bit of a good start as well. James Krahula, Joe Burchett also taking a good start, and we'll see who is prevailing through turn number 1. So close, side by side, all the way around, clear of contact. That's going to be the top 4 single filing it out. Still a battle going on between Austin Coop and Matthew Murphy. That squares away before turn number 3. Then Matt Cucker and the number 18 machine, or number 19 machine of Tyler Dalton, still squeezing side by side, and that's going to put him off the track a little bit, but able to save it. Great job by Tyler Dalton, was Matt Cucker door checks him a little bit, but everything's good so far. Christian Peterson still going turn to turn, able to make quick work of Seth the Merchant, and still leading this race.
Start was very exciting, and apparently that was just no doubt was more than likely just a little bit of a battle for real estate, seeing who could get to what first. And unfortunately for Dalton, he had went wide, so understandable that Cucker tried to go for the gap, and he did make it, although as we are now on board the 26th of Joe Burchett, as you can see that number 57, he was pretty much been in front of him. Seth the Merchant has been in front of Burchett essentially this entire second half of the race, well, the entire first half of the race for a large majority of that. I'd say about 4, maybe 5, maybe about 10 laps even. But right now, Joe Burchett just has to run down the Merchant. But aside from right now, though, the lap times are basically equal, both 1 minute 28 seconds and then more like a minute 28.8 seconds.
And as we're on board with Joe Burchett, you can see the wheel through the camera, and you can just see how it's really working and how these drivers are really just working that wheel so hard throughout this whole entire track. And this is exactly why I see these guys the admins wanting to race here. It's really physically demanding as well as mentally demanding, as you just see how these drivers are really working, and seeing how these drivers in front, that's going to be the 57 of Seth the Merchant in front of Joe Burchett, really trying, everything that he can and trying to keep that pressure on, trying to force into a mistake, and there's a little wiggle right there, but being able to see everything perfectly. And now Seth the Merchant still able to be in front, and it's just such a great time. You can see how tightly these drivers are really running together and how much effort they are putting into the wheel, and we were talking about that, and just really pushing everything that they can into every single corner and making sure that they're pushing the track limits and able to keep it under their power still. But it's just really entertaining to see all these drivers so far making everything work to their advantage.
It's absolutely amazing seeing all these drivers trying to do whatever they can within the confines of the track, at the very least, to get by or race the driver in front of them. And Burchett almost had the right-hand side, the right-hand quarter panel of that 57 of the Merchant, but unfortunately that number 26 just couldn't get there in time. He almost had it, but if he did decide to make a move, it probably would have been a bit too late. So he decides to play a little bit safe and back off just a little bit. Aside from right here, straight up through turn 5 and 6, right here, practically on top of the back bumper of Seth the Merchant.
Yeah, right there, so close. And coming back from this caution period that was a few laps ago, and having such fresh tires, you can see all these drivers really pushing it to the truck's limit, really testing these tires and making sure that they get everything out of it. As Joe Burchett hops that corner a little bit too much, gets a little bit sideways, that's going to leave a lot of time on the track, and he's got to make all of that up very quickly. So, just making sure they can get everything out of this truck before these tires really wear off and go downhill for everybody. As we're going to take a look back to Matthew Murphy and Matt Cucker still battling it out, taking on are picking up right where they left off last stint, going into every single section, and they're about coming to 15 laps to go next time by. So they're really running out of time. Matt Kucker's gonna have to come back and really pass a few trucks if he wants a decent finish from where he started. So all these drivers really working it out amongst themselves and really trying to do everything they can. We're going to have to see where he goes into turn number 1. He closes a little bit, actually, and 87 still right in front and really battling between themselves.
Now, Kucker had an interesting bobble through that corner in the process of trying to catch up. Of course, actually, no, that was actually Matt Kucker, so apologies for that, but nonetheless, Kucker trying to do everything that I can, and you mentioned drivers pushing the car to their limits, while we've seen 2 people get a little bit fishtail sideways, essentially, throughout these past 2 laps, so everyone trying to figure out what they can do now that they're used to this after that first half of the race. So right now, the battle stall itself out just a little bit. Kucker's closed the gap ever so slightly, trying to use those curbs to his advantage.
Yeah, and looking back towards Seth the Merchant, Joe Burchett still just fighting ever so hard, and seeing all that fighting as well. We talk about fighting on oval tracks, and that's really side by side racing. But this, for road racing, this is basically battling side by side because Joe Burchett is behind a truck and he has to change his braking lines, and Seth the Merchant sees a truck right behind him in his mirror, and he's making sure that he doesn't make a mistake, but Joe Burchett's trying to force him into a mistake, and Christian Peterson is loving seeing that as you see Joe Burchett go to that right side of Seth the Merchant, but seeing all of this happening behind Christian Peterson, he's loving it because he's going to be able to pull away. He's been able to pull away quite a bit. He's 2.5 seconds out in front, and I expect to see that up more and more. But these guys are really just battling amongst themselves and knowing that every single time that they're battling right there, it's going to be more time added to Christian Peterson's distance that's been added. So they're really just going to have to find a way to battle amongst themselves, but still be up in the corner. So it's really interesting as the 87's turned. I saw the relative, and I'm gonna take a look at that again. The 69 of Matt Kucker had finally tried something else, and the 87 of Matthew Murphy is turned. So that's really unfortunate for him. Going into the S's, the number 69 just tries to get beneath the number 87, and the 87 just got turned. That's really unfortunate way to start his night, but he's going to be able to
26 around. Joe Burchett just spun out. He got a piece of the grass, and now he's off the track.
And, we talk about just getting a piece of the grass and how costly that can be, and that's going to be a lot of time lost to Joe Burchett. And, now you see James Krahula right in front of him, or not really right in front of him, but he's been passed for the lead. So now Seth the Merchant going to have to try and get everything that he can. Gary, you saw what happened in the 26th, so go ahead and go.
Yeah, for Burchett, he was just almost about to make it through about turn 17, but unfortunately just that small little streak before that, just about the exit of turn 16. Unfortunately got a small piece of the grass on the right-hand side, and ever so slightly, about a width of the tire, maybe just ever so slightly more. That's what got him loose, and when he tried to turn into the corner, that just completely destroyed any grip that he had on the right-hand side. But thankfully, though, he didn't really hit anybody. Nobody hit him, but unfortunately, though, he's lost a lot of time, like you mentioned, and the position to James Krahula. But it looks like at this moment, Joe Burchett is trying to catch up as quick as possible, but he's going to have to be careful to not make that mistake again.
And you see all these drivers, you see these drivers. Sorry, I was on a different channel right there, but now, sorry for that long pause of awkward silence. But we talk about all these drivers going back and seeing how they're really, spin out, but yet they're able to catch back up. So Joe Burchett is going to have to try and do that same thing. He's really closing the gap on that number 4 of James Krahula, and you're going to see how these drivers are really working out. And Matt Cucker is still on pit road now, and is going to lose quite a bit of time. I see him out of the seat, so that quite possibly could be the end of his night, unfortunately early. So that's going to leave 13 cars, I believe, on the lead lap. Everybody's really spaced out evenly except for Mike Rhino and John Theodore fighting for a position. That's going to be John Theodore taking away that 8th position from Mike Rhino for the time being. Mike Rhino still trying to get everything that he can back from John Theodore. So we'll have to see as they go through the S's and through the uphill right-hander.
Didn't mention Matt Cucker a while ago that he was out of the seat. Well, he unfortunately did decide to retire it, so his day is pretty much over, unfortunately. But nonetheless, like you mentioned, that 3-car battle for 7th place essentially is slowly starting to possibly become a 2-car battle. Theodore made his way by Mike Rhino for the 8th place position, so Theodore now sets his sights on that number 1 of Reese Bayham for 7th. But aside from that, still trying to recover is Joe Burchett, but it looks like he's got a little bit of a gap though between he and Krahula. So Krahula may be pushing his car a little bit more. He may be being less conservative than he was in the first half of this race.
And, you got to watch out for that. James Krahula battling his car so hard, seeing that Joe Burchett is coming up right behind him. We talk about that truck getting bigger in the mirror and then maybe keeping that pressure on James Krahula, and then that forces him into a mistake. We've seen so many mistakes here tonight, and you see how easy it is for each and every driver and how it works out for them in the end. And you just got to watch every single driver, make sure that they're doing everything that they can to keep their truck under them. And Christian Peterson is really just running away, really adding another second onto the Seth the Merchant gap, as basically a whole entire turn right in front of him, maybe a whole entire section. So that's really going to bring pressure onto Seth the Merchant to try and catch up to Christian Peterson. But Joe Burchett, maybe even just a corner behind now. He's really made up a lot of time, so those tires really have got to be screaming. And both of these drivers really giving everything they have. I feel one driver doesn't want to give up that podium position, the other driver wants to get all of his positions back. So really watching all these drivers fight is really entertaining, even though they're not close. But watching all of the timing come down to it, and James Krahula gains just a little bit of time on him as they cross the scoring marker. So we'll have to see how these drivers are going to be able to. Oh, he nearly gets off track, but able to keep it straight for the time being. That's Joe Burchett. Just watching him brake is just so entertaining, because you've seen, just if he gets a little too hard on the brakes, you've seen what happens. So he's got to find that middle ground of how every single braking point is so perfect. As he gets off a little bit too squirrely right there, that's going to lose a little bit of time towards him. And it's just really hard to see all these drivers really fight for everything that they have.
Seth the Merchant went off. I was looking, you did mention the timing, and Seth the Merchant got way too much speed heading into turn number 7, went off the track. So now that's going to put that number 57 into the sights of James Krahula. Like you mentioned, that timing, I was looking at the gap, and it was essentially that steady 6.8 seconds, but it started rapidly increasing. So now that lead gap is essentially 13 seconds.
Yeah, again, just making sure that you're keeping the pressure on. If you're James Krahula, still got to keep that pressure on. Obviously, wanting to push a little bit harder, knowing that gap wasn't getting any smaller, so he had to try something different. And Seth the Merchant just pushed a little bit too hard and went around. And we've seen that a lot with each and every driver, so it's got to be heartbreaking for him. But James Krahula is loving this now, that he can see him right in front of him as he gets sideways a little bit, and now he's off again. So James Krahula is going to try and pull back to him as we have 9 laps to go here at Virginia International Raceway. It's really coming down to the wire between these two drivers. Now we got a little bit of a battle shaping up. So Seth the Merchant's really going to have to find a way to get away from James Krahula, but James Krahula as well try to keep the pressure on him.
And James Krahula is trying, like you mentioned, to keep the pressure on him, but Something that came into my mind is that essentially, if you're spread out, you're still racing the driver ahead of you or behind you, but essentially, if you have a decent gap in front or behind, you still essentially have to race the track as well as the driver, just not the driver as hard as racing the track. So, right now, Seth the Merchant needs to be as incident-free as possible or mistake-free as possible because right now it's not really working out so well. He's still managing to hang on to that second place position, but unfortunately for him though, James Krahula is pretty much ready to strike whenever he can. A little bit loose off it seems, about turn 16 to 17, so that's going to leave that slipstream open for James Krahula. He could be making a move entering turn 1 or not. Seth the Merchant with a defensive line on the right hand side.
Yeah, James Krahula is going to try and find every single possible time. He's going to try and outbreak Seth the Merchant going into turn number 1. They're side by side.
Oh, Burchett goes off in the back.
And Seth the Merchant as well goes off for the time being. That's going to be James Krahula. P number 2 is going to try and track down Christian Peterson with only 8 laps to go now. Does Seth the Merchant have an answer for James Krahula going into the S's? It does not appear so. That was a great outbreaking by James Krahula. But as you pointed out, Joe Burchett as well pulls off and gets off into the grass. So that's going to be tough for him to make another comeback. So James Krahula able to take that position away. That's going to leave a lot of anger. Maybe, Seth the Merchant tries everything in his power. He really caught up to him, though. That was very close. You could see his back end really starting to step out on him, but he saved at the last second. He's getting ever so close. This is going to be a great battle all the way to the end. Seth the Merchant really not letting him get away. Really making up time, under braking every which possible way, was on the edge of really locking up those brakes, going through every single corner imaginable. Now James Krahula is really pulling a little bit of a gap, but we'll have to see as they go into turn number 1 how he's going to brake. And Seth the Merchant, great under braking, but James Krahula, great under getting the power down out of the corners and really running away with it. So, you just got to be better in every single other possible way that James Krahula is if you're Seth the Merchant. As Austin Coop moves up in position, takes advantage of Joe Burchett, a little off-road excursion. So Austin Coop moves himself up into 4th position. But we have to watch every single battle going on, and we're have to see how these drivers really work out with them. And James Krahula is still out in front on P number 2, but that's a 17-second gap from him to Christian Peterson, so we have to watch how that works out. But I believe that Christian Peterson has this one in the bag unless he really does a drastic mistake.
And Christian Peterson has a very nice spot for about 18.2 or so seconds. And was about, I'd say about 2, not even tenths, more like hundredths, but nonetheless though, positions 6 through 9, all these 4 drivers essentially straight under a blanket. We have Tyler Dalton, who's finally made his way, but has a bit of a distance between he and Reese Mayhem, who's in 7th, 8th, John Theodore, and 9th, Matthew Murphy. So right now, it looks like the closest drivers in this battle will be Murphy and Theodore. Hello, up to the inside. Murphy, goodness gracious, I believe he had a little bit of a tail wiggle off that corner as well. It's about turn 7. But now a bit of an even spread between all 4 of these drivers. Any one of them could make a strike for any of these positions at any moment. But right now they are most likely going to be waiting. But for Tyler Dalton, though, he can definitely relax as he's starting to pull away. The more these drivers battles, the more that Tyler Dalton can pull away, and essentially this would be end up being a 3-car battle for 7th instead of a 4-car battle for 6th. And I believe that 3-car battle is just now slowly starting to become a thing.
Yeah, and we've seen Matthew Murphy and John Theodore really tail to tail every single lap and every single stint that we've seen here tonight. They've gotten really close towards that front couple of sections, and then those last 2 sections, John Theodore really pulls away under all of that straightaway sections essentially compared to what they're going through right now. So Matthew Murphy is definitely better under braking, but again, a different driver is better at different positions of the track, so you got to compensate for those going throughout every single part of the track. As you see, this is the closest they've been going through that corner and through the S's now. And John Theodore gets off the track a little bit. That's going to leave the door open for Matthew Murphy going down into the right uphill turn. You see them get ever so close. Who's going to outbrake each other? Oh, they are door to door. A little bit of banging going. And into the second part of the track. Who's going to take advantage? Who's going to get let off first? And that's going to be the number 87, Matthew Murphy. John Theodore able to take his position back with ease and really be able to breathe another sigh of relief going through the later parts of this track. And the front two have really pulled away. So basically, this is a battle for P8 as we've seen all night long between these two, Gary.
And these two trying to, more importantly, more likely Matthew Murphy trying to get by John Theodore right now. He's using the slipstream essentially the same time their backfire went off is what I noticed. So right now down to the driver's right hand side for turn 1. Can Murphy outbrake Theodore entering turn 1? He's got so far a piece of the curb. Uses that. Hello, the 84. Goodness gracious. Almost a little bit of contact. Maybe just a little bit of trading paint there, but Theodore, unfortunately, could not hold off Matthew Murphy there, entering turn number 1. So, looks like that position number 8 will go to Matthew Murphy for the time being, as we're slowly starting to, or more we're quickly starting to approach 5 laps to go. As Christian Peterson now has a 21-second gap.
And while we were distracted with that fantastic battle going on, James Krahula was able to make the pass on Seth the Merchant. So he might have. I believe he already was. I'm sorry, this is crazy action going all over the track. It's hard to keep track of everything, but nonetheless, James Krahula in second place still. So trying to get back to that back bumper of Christian Peterson, but still such a far battle going on. And this is just going to basically be a battle who can get to that second place position. This is a fantastic close battle going on between 57 and the 4. If they fight any longer, maybe that number 53 of Austin Coop can be thrown into the mix. But lap 36 now, getting ever so close to the end of the race here at VIR. And this has really been an interesting race to see, and how these trucks have really handled this track going on. And James Krahula really handling this track, was holding on to all of his stuff during that early part of the race. We saw him give away some positions, and it was a lot of give early on in this race, but now we're seeing a lot more take by James Krahula and really trying to get up to that first position, but it just might be a little too late. And the Seth the Merchant's going to try and take advantage, and you see lap traffic up ahead of them, and to see if James Krahula is going to be able to make it around, or if they're going to have to wait a little bit longer, and that's going to bring Seth the Merchant really close up to the back bumper, maybe even Austin Coop, depending on how long they're stuck behind, because this is just a one-lane racetrack going on until you basically get to either the front straightaway or technically the back straightaway after the S's, and there they go around as that lap car gets into the dirt a little bit, but both cars able to get around him, and we'll see if Seth the Merchant's going to be able to make a pass going into turn number 1. And you also got to think about what these drivers have under themselves tire wise, using all these tires for about 17 laps, and really have been pushing this truck to the limits as we've been talking about. And maybe Seth the Merchant just doesn't have enough, or maybe he's just waiting for that right spot to get around him, and you see him just using so much curb, so maybe that lends to the fact that he doesn't have enough tire under him, so he has to rely on some of the curbing to help him get around this track, as we've seen him been doing in that first part of the race. And now we're seeing him do it really a lot, as he's going to try and make a move to that right side. He's going to get nearly tapped to that number 4. That was so close, nearly had to hold my breath, as just a little bit of damage to that number 4 machine, James Krahula, where he got into him. But thankfully for road course racing, really aerodynamics don't really work. You just got to make sure your tires are good and you're able to make some great runs under braking and under the once you get the power down.
Who needs aerodynamics at a road course when you have a steering wheel and essentially a steering wheel, 4 tires, and all of this? My goodness, this is going to be insane when it comes down to the final few laps. And already we're on 3 laps to go, and already Christian Peterson is essentially in turn number 3, whereas number 2 is just now getting past the start-finish line. So that's how big of a gap that is, almost essentially about 21.9 seconds, 22 seconds if you'd rather round up. But now for second place, Merchant was looking to the inside in the middle of turns 1 and 2. Couldn't get it done. Or driver's right-hand side as Magnaka moves out of the way for the second time tonight. So right now, James Krahula, he's going to have to play a lot of defense here in the final closing laps. But for the moment, through turns 5 and 6, a little bit more on the curb with Seth the Merchant, pretty much on top of the back bumper of Krahula that time around. But Krahula doing a great job to hold his own and play a lot of defense through entering turn number 7 this time around. Expecting Seth the Merchant to have a interesting approach. Well, this time by, he uses more of the curb instead and a bit of a wheel hop, but doesn't really dive it in like last time around. He knows that wasn't going to work, so most likely going to try a different strategy and a different passing opportunity here, as we're just now, I believe, approaching the 2 laps to go point in this race.
Yeah, and looking back for a quick second, John Theodore, or Matthew Murphy, was able to get around Reese Bam. So Matthew Murphy now in that 7th position, trying to get to that number 19 of Tyler Dalton, but he is 6 seconds ahead of him. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen within the time lapse or time that he has left here at VIR. But definitely a fantastic battle shaping up for this 2nd position, going throughout all of these corners. And you have about 40 turns left on this race, so you have 40 chances to get something done here. That's how Seth the Merchant has to look at this. And for James Krahula, you have 40 turns to really make sure that the number 57 stays behind you, and you have 40 turns to make sure that you do not make a mistake and go off track. So now Seth the Merchant really getting to that back bumper of the number 4.
Something that's that James Krahula is going to have to look out for, and that'll be 17 turns. You were close, 40 laps though, and then you can see the brake rotors and that number 4, Seth the Merchant, really close to the gap. He's going to get loose off turn number 7, and he really closely tried to throw that in there, but unfortunately it didn't work out as of then. So turn 7 for Seth the Merchant seems to be that very opportune passing time, but nonetheless though, going to be on top of the back bumper once again. But for now though, Christian Peterson up in the lead. He's going to be taking the white flag.
White flag for Christian Peterson, and that number 23 machine really got out in front during the later or the early part of this second stint, and has not looked back. Has a 20-second gap as of right now, and now 21-second gap as the timing updates. But going through the S's one last time and up to the straightaway leading to that right uphill back part of the track, and one last time, just making sure everything is so flawless for him, and how everything is just going through his head, and just making sure that every single braking opportunity is perfect, and not getting too hard on the brakes and not too hard on the throttle where he's going to be able to spin out. But going through the final few turns of this race, just such a battle going through him. And Seth the Merchant, he was up in that top spot for quite a few laps, and then Christian Peterson comes along and takes it. But going now through the final turn and onto the front straightaway, Christian Peterson does it again. Another win for Christian Peterson and that number 23 machine, as we're going to take a look back to the battle of James Krahula and Seth the Merchant going through the final parts of this race. And now James Krahula going to be able to secure that 2nd place finish, and Seth the Merchant finishes off in the podium position.
Seth the Merchant had a great race and tried to throw it in there. Unfortunately couldn't make it. Austin Coop as of right now trying to battle it out with Joe Burchett. Burchett can't get anything done as of right now, so that means Coop will be in 4th place, and then Burchett rounds out your top 5.
And that's 9 cars finished on the lead lap. So with that, Christian Peterson gets his 2nd win of the season, and we're going to take a quick commercial break and then come back for post-race and interviews.
finish here of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Will it be Tim Hogan? It's going to be Christopher DeMerry at the line.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of LSR TV and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Live Sim Racing LLC and iRacing.com Motorsport Simulations. LSR TV would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.
Welcome back to VIR here tonight, as we just had a 40-lap race throughout this 2.25-mile track, this very narrow, windy track. It was a fantastic battle between second and third throughout this whole entire race. Basically, James Krahula and Seth the Merchant throughout the last parts of this track or race. So, you know, really great job by them, and we'll take a look at your full field rundown after this race. And your winner tonight is exactly where he started, the number 23 of Christian Peterson. P2 will go to James Krahula, starting 5th. Seth the Merchant will be finishing exactly where he started as well. In 3rd position, Austin Coop makes a great battle up to 4th. Joe Burchett having a lot of problems trying to stay on the track as he finishes 5th. 6th will go to Tyler Dalton. Reese Bam finishes 7th. Matthew Murphy 8th. P9 will go to John Theodore, and that will be the last car on your lead lap. Mike Renault will finish 10th.
Finishing 11th will be William Kemp, also a lap down. Derek Paulson also unfortunately finishes a lap down in at 12th. 2 laps down, 13th and 14th, John McNaughton and Paul Henley respectively. And unfortunately, I believe the drivers that unfortunately did not get a chance to finish this race. 15th, Gerald Campbell, Matt Cucker finishes 16th, 17th, Sean Cross, Jeremy Adams 18th, 19th, Tom Moreno, John Lyday at 20th, and Kenny Lowry did not start this race, so will be scored in 21st.
And that's a look at your full field rundown for the finishing parts of this race. And now we're going to pull in the number 23 of Christian Peterson here, the winner of tonight's race. And, you know, Christian, walk us through how difficult this track was. We saw a lot of drivers struggling with this track and trying to stay on it. Was it really hard?
Yeah, it was pretty hard. I mean, the tires lasted like, I don't know, 4 laps, and then after that it was a lot of wheel spin and a lot of curbs. I was using a lot of the curbs, and a lot of the elevation changes up in the back half of the track was a little tricky with these big heavy trucks and the little tires. But the second run, actually, it seemed, I don't know if with the dynamic weather, if it got a little cooler or if what happened, but second run, it seemed the tires lasted like almost double what they lasted the first run.
And you know, going through this race and watching, you know, it's obviously a road course, and it's going to be really hard to get some cautions as if it were on an oval. So going into tonight, knowing that you probably only have one caution with that competition caution, what was really your mindset in knowing that you know, you have about 20 laps with the same set of tires as you were talking about?
I mean, I was pretty much just pushing hard. I just was trying to not be as aggressive with the throttle like on the qualifying laps, but I think as the race went on, I actually got smoother and the truck got better. So like I just kind of just was being consistent and trying to run hot laps, and that paid off. But I had that one screw up in the beginning, and then I actually didn't know about the competition caution because Kyle had the issue with his computer, and there's a few little delays. But yeah, I don't know. It was a good race.
It was a good race indeed, and coming off of Talladega Super Speedway, then going to a road course, and now next week going to the Milwaukee Mile. How is that all going to work out for you, and how are you preparing for every single race?
Just kind of, we're just hosting a session before each race, like 2 hour session or something the night before, the day of. So, it seems to be working out all right for us. We kind of had a slump the past 2 weeks, but the road course was good for us. So.
Absolutely. And before we let you go, any sponsors or shout outs? Who gets it done for the number 23 machine?
Just everybody at Vincia, everybody at Peterson Irrigation, 6 Man Race Cars, and Austin Designs, and obviously you guys for putting on a good show at LSR TV, and Kyle for everything he does. And I think my parents are watching back home, and everybody else watching on the broadcast.
All right, that was the number 23 machine of Christian Peterson. Now, Gary Weaver is going to be with the second and third place positions down on pit road.
Yeah, I'm here with the number 4 of James Corhula, who started in 5th and quietly made his way up to 2nd, just managed to hold off Seth the Merchant after a little bit of contact, and that was essentially very exciting. So, Corhula, we saw you on the first stint and the majority of the race, just riding behind in the 4th place position of that 4-car battle for essentially the lead, but spread out. So, how did you manage to hold out? How did you hold out to manage that number 57 of Seth the Merchant? Yeah, Battle for Second was very, very exciting as well. So, second question, which is in a way related to this, are your shoulders in any way, or your shoulders or arms in any way sore after this? Because no doubt 17, well, roughly 17 turns at this track, and after all this lot of playing with the pedals, the throttle, and the brake, no doubt you have to have at least some cramps or soreness after this. Have definitely done an exciting job, and definitely done a great job also holding off Seth the Merchant. So before we let you go, another question for next week as we head to the Milwaukee Mile next week. Any thoughts for that track next week? Well, it looks like you already know what we were going to ask next. So, of course, any extra shout outs that you like to give, or as that all you have? Well, if that is all you have, then we're going to go ahead and let you go. Congratulations on your second place finish. Yep, thank you for putting on an amazing show. So, of course, our third place finisher now is going to be the number 57 of Septim Merchant, who almost had that second place finish, but unfortunately, it seemed that you pushed a bit too hard, and well, unfortunately, just lost those tires at the tail end of this race.
Yeah, doing everything I could there. I started off that running really hard, pretty much running Q laps for how hard I was running compared to the first run, trying to hold Joe off because he was all over me for those first 10 laps. And then when he spun out, I kind of just tried to settle in, but I had used my tires up so much that just went off, made that mistake, and then James got around me there and just did everything I could to try to get back by him, but the rear tires were gone. I was chattering the tires going into the corner, sliding them all over the place on exit. The only real place I had a chance was the through the S's, and then the uphill right-hander was the only place I was really faster than him, and that's where I'd make up all my time. But other than that, yeah, just fun race.
That's absolutely exciting to watch too. Of course, throughout this race, the track was also rubbering in as well. So, did you find more grip or traction in certain places of this track that you didn't really have in the first portion of this race?
Yeah, I think the track overall, at least for the first half before I destroyed my tires, it had just a little bit more grip. It felt like once the rubber got laid down, we were able to run. I was able to run about half a second faster a lap. CP picked up like almost a full second. So it was definitely faster, but yeah.
Definitely did manage to pull off a podium finish. So finish where you started, not too bad, of course. Any thoughts heading into the Milwaukee Mile for next week?
Just happy I got a good points tonight. For tonight, just gonna try to do the same there. I always struggle at flat tracks, and that's a pretty flat track, so we'll see what we can do there. I'm sure CP is really good there, so he'll probably dominate there again, and then we'll try to catch up with him the next week.
Before I let you go, any shout-outs? Who makes it happen for you in that number 57?
Just all the guys that have been here. They're running the league, and Peterson Irrigation for being on the truck, and Kyle Barnes for putting on the league. Really fun to run a VR tonight.
Absolutely fun to watch and commentate as well. So congratulations once again on your third place finish, and we are going to go ahead and let you go.
Thank you.
And with that completes our interviews. Thank you to all the drivers down on pit road for staying and chatting with us. Always appreciate it to give you guys a little inside scoop on what's going on inside of the driver's mind. And, we're talking about going into next week. We have the Milwaukee Mile, then followed closely behind Myrtle Beach. Again, this is a interesting schedule. The admins have done such a great job making sure that everything is shaken up, and all these drivers have something new and fresh inside their minds. And every single time we go to a track, and it's just such a different layout, such a different pyramid scheme going on, and we just have so many different kinds of tracks that these drivers are not used to, but they're still running.
Yeah, these drivers, especially for the Milwaukee Mile next week, that's going to be very interesting. In a way, to me, it seems like it's just extended and wider version of New Hampshire.
So next week we will be back with the CEA American Pool Supply Truck Series, and that will be again at Milwaukee Mile. But the good news is that you won't have to wait that long, because the Cars Esport Tour will be here Wednesday the 27th. For a full schedule, you can visit www.livesimracing.com. And follow us on social media on Facebook at facebook.com/LSRTVofficial, and on Twitter at LSRTV, on behalf of everybody behind the scenes at LSRTV, DJ Lion, Lauren Lawson, and everybody in the booth night in, night out. That will be Kyle Barnes, the admin. Thanks for putting out such a great production and great season. The producer doing such a phenomenal job with what he had tonight, Cisco Scaramuza, and the broadcasters Gary Weaver. I'm Trevin Valderrama, and we will see you next week. Good night.